Hello to everyone in our live audience, and welcome to this, the third in a four-part webcast series produced by Store Brands and the Food Marketing Institute based on FMI's recent The Power of Private Brands Research and Report. I'm Kevin Francella, Brand Director of Store Brands, and I'm your moderator today. Let's take a look at what's on tap for this webcast. You'll hear some key findings from FMI's The Power of Private Brands report, and our two panelists will provide their insight and analysis of that report. You'll also hear additional insight and perspective from Digimarc Corporation, our sponsor of this webcast. And all of you in the live audience can ask questions along the way. Use that Q&A function on the left side of your screen in the lower left. Ask questions throughout the webcast. We'll queue them up and get to them later in the webcast. You can also use this section if you have any technical questions about the webcast itself, and you'll get a direct reply from our webcast producer. And at the end of the event, there'll be an evaluation survey, and we encourage you to provide feedback using this feature. Your feedback will help us produce even better webcasts in the future. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available later today through the webcast registration portal. And we invite you to live tweet during this webcast. We're at store_brands, and the hashtag for this event is Partner Perspectives. Let's now introduce our panelists today. Jim Wisner is the president of Wisner Marketing Group. Jim was a vice president at Jewel Food Stores, Shaw's Supermarkets, and Topco Associates before starting the Wisner Marketing Group in 1999. Wisner Marketing works with a wide range of food and drug clients and has developed many industry-wide research and education programs, including center store renewal, women's well-being marketing strategies, supply chain optimization for specialty foods, multicultural marketing, and others. Wisner Marketing is currently developing an industry-wide approach to store brand category management with FMI. You can expect that later in the year. Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you much, Kevin. Glad to be here.
Doug Baker is Vice President of Industry Relations for FMI, where he facilitates the Private Brands Leadership Council. The council is a community of private brand practitioners who have developed a platform for non-competitive trading partner collaboration. Doug began his career in the food retail industry in 1984 as a bagger with Fry's Food Stores. His 33 years in the food business include leadership roles at Kroger division of Fry's, Kraft Nabisco, and Federated Group. Throughout his career, Doug focused on retail operations, consumer packaged goods manufacturing, private brand development, and marketing. Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Clevin. Pleasure to be here, and thank you to all the listeners out there for joining us. Appreciate it.
Last but not least, we have Heidi Detloff from Digimarc. We're pleased to have the sponsorship support of Digimarc to bring you this webcast. Heidi, welcome, and thank you for your participation today, and we'll introduce you in a little bit more detail a little later on in the webcast.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Okay. As I've done in these prior two webcasts, I just want to bring to the live audience's attention that these phrases on the screen, as well as others such as own brands and our brands, are interchangeable in the industry. Our presenters today may use any of these terms, and I wanted to let you know that they use them interchangeably. Now, as I mentioned, this webcast is the third in a four-part series corresponding to the four chapters in the Power of Private Brands Research and Report. So to give you a little context of before we start today's webcast, let's review some key findings of the first two parts of the report. From the Register, featured a survey and analysis of retail sales data by IRI. And here are some of the key findings. Private brands are being challenged by a 1-2 punch of declining store trips and problematic deflation, leading to lagging own brand performance against national brands. Retailers in the club and mass channels are capturing increased own brand share from grocery. Organic private brands represent a small but growing segment of the industry. It gained a half share point in the last year at the expense of value and mainstream segments of private brands. And in the frozen department, 3 or 4 segments grew in the past year, led by premium, organic, and mainstream. Grocers probably won't be able to win on the value segment alone, given that the competition from mass merchants, limited assortment stores, and other value players. So they'll need to determine how to get better at segments such as mainstream and premium. And finally, while percent of sales on promotion increased across the board in total U.S. food, private brand experienced the greatest increase, about twice as much as the overall food business, and private brands benefited by that increased investment. From the Consumer is the second chapter of the report, and it's based on a consumer survey and social media research, both conducted again by IRI. And here you see some of the key insights. Starting off with, millennials are embracing private brands and are more likely to be heavy buyers of private brands. And the best store brand quality perceptions belong to perimeter categories in the store, with 74% positive perception for dairy, 70% for fresh produce, and 68% for bakery. While quality perceptions of specific categories don't vary much by generations, OTC healthcare is an outlier. And in seeking advertised specials, about 31% of millennials sought out store brand apps, a result that should drive more retailers to make progress with this platform. There are many more insights from this chapter, but rather than trying to present them all here, we should, that gives a bit of a context for this next chapter in this report. So let's move on. If you didn't have a chance to view the first two webcasts, you can do that on demand. Go to storebrands.com and click on any of the webcast banners on that homepage, and that'll bring you back to that registration portal where you can view that webcast. And as well, if you're interested in getting the full FMI report, The Power of Private Brands, that is available at the FMI at the website, fmi.org, and navigate there to the online store there. Okay, so that brings us to the topic for today's webcast, and it's the third chapter in this Power of Private Brands report. From the Industry takes a look at how the sausage is made, as they say in Washington. Private brands are shared responsibility between brand owners and manufacturers. Each brings something to the table. They have to work together, develop strategies together, grow together, and perhaps most important, both have to be profitable. The data and insights presented here are based on a wide-ranging industry survey that polled members of the FMI Private Brands Leadership Council. About 60% of the respondents were retailer brand owners, and the balance were manufacturers. The results form a benchmark, so this survey can be repeated in future years to gauge industry progress. And so before we jump into the data from this part of the study, it's important to note that private brands is at the top of the list among industry executives to establish a point of difference in their business. And this is reported, as reported in the FMI Speak study from last year, as you see here on the screen. And you see that a private brand program ranks ahead of typical areas such as customer research, customer service, and even fresh departments. So, Doug, how about we begin with you? Now that the industry leadership is looking at private brands to lead their point of difference, in what ways can retailers do so with private brands?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I think we could say that really brand owners are limited only by their imagination, their defined private brand role, or their tolerance to invest and sometimes fail. But as you've all heard, fail fast and move on. So I would offer a few things to consider is make innovation and risk-taking okay within your organization. How can products be manufactured differently and with a focus on current consumer needs and demands? As an example, are there less processed, higher quality ingredients you could be using? Can you use fewer ingredients? Look to new packaging technologies to enhance the consumer experience. Develop easier to use, easier to prepare meal options. But bottom line, to differentiate, we must challenge the norms. I would also offer that don't allow the tyranny of the present to rule your day. Be a student. Never stop learning about the industry and consumer trends. Apply those learnings continually to update your program and manage your brand. Technology and consumers change often. Look at how much consumers have changed over the last 20 to 30 years, and then ask yourself, how much have our stores and brands and marketing functions changed in that same time?
And so, Doug, what's the supplier's role in creating a private brand program that differentiates?
Sure, Kevin. Suppliers wake up in the morning thinking about their product and their categories. They probably spend all day thinking about it, and for many probably go to sleep thinking about it. Brand owners do this as well, but they also have a much broader focus and range of categories that they need to be thinking about on a daily basis. So I think it would be in the best interest of suppliers to proactively provide industry updates to their clients. Come to them with implications from impending regulations. Could be market conditions impacting ingredients. Should be definitely new trends in packaging, taste, flavor, product usage. Retailers and trading partners meet when there's a business issue to be addressed. Unfortunately, probably not often enough to discuss proactive strategic topics.
And Jim, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, yes, Kevin. With store brands, sometimes it can be really easy to fall in the trap of only thinking about differentiation from the standpoint of the product itself. We really need to look just as hard at the other components that make up the whole product experience. Packaging functionality in particular is one area where store brands can readily choose to move ahead of the national brands. And whether you do that with pull tops, resealable pouches, clear cans, virtual packages, or any other way that can make the product more valuable for the consumer. Areas like sustainable sourcing, we're seeing store brands move ahead of the brands, particularly in seafood. Hy-Vee has sustainable sushi bars now, canned tuna at Meijer, and the list goes on and on. So lots of opportunity here.
Yeah, I want to ask you the same question I posed to Doug. So what is, from your perspective, what is the supplier role in the differentiation of store brands?
Well, to echo Doug a little bit here, suppliers really are closer to the trends in their individual categories. But what's important is that, they help lead the charge in moving beyond a traditional approach of, just being the fast follower. But now look to anticipate, and I think in a lot of cases even lead the national brands in responding to the trends that are out there. To get there, manufacturers need to go beyond just producing the same item for every customer, but also develop more opportunities for customization.
Okay. Okay. So with that foundation, let's get into the some of the findings of the private Power of Private Brands study. So, in the role of private brands, the respondents to the survey conducted for the Power of Private Brands report indicated that private brands' primary role in the industry is now as loyalty builders, as you see here, that top bar, ahead of margin builder and leveraging national brands. So, Jim, why has loyalty moved to the top, and what does it take to earn or build loyalty?
Well, as we, learned in the first webinar, the battle today is really all about trips. I can buy any national brand almost anywhere I want to get it. So if we're going to think about loyalty, it has to come either from my private brands or from the shopping experience that I offer to my customers. The key here is you want to get to a point of evolving how the shopper makes decisions about a store brand from one that's a conscious choice till it gets to the point that it becomes a habit that's really born out of their loyalty, both to the brand and to the store. And, until you really get to that point, the relationships can be fleeting.
So how do you get there?
Well, over many years, store brands have taken probably too passive an approach. They offer a better price for an equivalent product, but a lot of people don't really communicate a whole lot beyond that. What happens then is that the store brand becomes genericized. We've done some research that suggests that a lot of shoppers think the store brand at one retailer may be pretty much the same as the store brand at another. In that case, loyalty from store to store is really no different than it is for the national brands. So the way to change that is to start creating product offerings that are differentiated from national brands, and in some cases differentiated from other retailers. Loyalty at the end of the day comes from experiences that you just can't get elsewhere.
So again, how offer any kind of perspective on how to do that?
Oh, you're asking a lot of questions here, Kevin. Let me give an example of what one retailer did. They actually went through every category in the store one by one and asked a real simple question. What can we do here that's going to make our brand a destination for our shoppers? The solutions in each category were different, may have been line pricing, broader range of products, unique items, promotions, better quality products. But at the end of the day, in every category, they looked to give the consumer a reason that went beyond merely being a price alternative to whatever national brand was on the shelf. Needless to say, this is a retailer that has a very successful private brand and very loyal shoppers.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic, and I dare say we could produce an entire webcast on this alone, or several. But Doug, I'm going to ask you to jump in and ask you your take on this this topic of loyalty and so forth.
Kevin, this was extremely exciting information for us, especially on the Leadership Council, and it's been a charge for us since I came to FMI, was to really sort of reposition how we look at private brands. We all know margin and leverage has been there for years and years, but the neat thing about loyalty is that it puts consumer at the center. So my experience is that consumers brag about your products when they exceed their expectations, when they get more than they thought they would or have been getting somewhere else. This is the point when they tell their friends and their family, both virtually and in person. And for us, that's the best marketing tool we can have out there. It's about their experience with your product.
Right. Okay, let's move on to this next section, methods to drive growth. And in terms of that, respondents were asked to rank on a scale of 1 to 5 how certain methods provided opportunity to drive growth. And I'll give the live audience a couple of seconds here to look at this chart because it seems to be a lot going on. So 5 provided the best opportunity, and you see here in this chart by the lighter lighter blue section of the bars to the right, and one provided the least opportunity, the darker blue section of the bars to the left. And so what this is showing is respondents rank customization on top of the list of methods that provide the best opportunity for growth. So Doug, let's come back to you. What are some of the challenges to customize private brand products?
Yeah, sure. Earlier we mentioned a penchant to avoid risk by trading partners on both sides of the equation, and for good reason. But some of the other obvious challenges, it could be higher initial cost due to inefficiencies at first because of shorter run times, having to change over machinery or investment in new equipment, replacing current ingredients with a better alternative, using clean potentially as a strategy. Another of the challenges is that typically product decisions are made based on historical information of a targeted brand or product. If you're developing a product that doesn't exist, buyers and producers are sometimes a little bit more risk adverse because there's nothing to fall back on.
And Jim, in what ways can private brand products be customized, in your opinion?
Well, in category management classes we've been conducting at St. Joe's for several years, we have the class outline and brainstorm what really is a list now of over 100 different ways that you can reimagine, rethink, and reinvent a product to somehow make it better, unique, or more exciting. And what's really kind of fun to do is to take a look at products we think of as commodity items, egg, sugar, canned vegetables, whatever. And what you find out is that there's really no dull products at all, just products that are awaiting, whatever our imagination and ideas can do with them. You create products that are not only more interesting for the consumer, but you come up with ideas that are also wind up being a lot more profitable for the retailer.
So how can suppliers approach customization for their customers?
It's not easy, first of all, but it's not only what they can do, but really how willing both they and their customers are willing to embrace customization. In our experience, transactional relationships, oddly enough, get in the way of lowering cost, but they really preclude manufacturers from pursuing new opportunities with those retailers. Retailers on their side need to be willing to collaborate, and manufacturers willing to be, to customize in ways that are going to work for both of them.
There's a lot of interesting perspective here in these first handful of slides. I again want to tell our live audience, if you have questions along the way, please present them in that box in the lower left, and we'll get to them a little later on in the webcast. So let's move on. This next chart is we turn to the biggest threats to private brands, and here you see a similar chart to the previous one, with this one ranking threats to private brands, and more than half of the respondents identified capital investment to drive innovation as the biggest threat to private brands, something that the brand owners can control. So Jim, why do you think this issue ranks so high?
I think it's really less about access to capital and more about the risks that are related to innovation, particularly for the manufacturers. Doug outlined a little earlier. When does the leading edge become the bleeding edge? We ask that all the time. A lot are reluctant to invest in a product, and this is both manufacturers and retailers, until long after that product's been established in the market. That worked in the old days, but, really what we need now is a leap of faith that, if you build it, in fact, they will come.
So if you feel funding is not an issue, how should brand owners prioritize their spend?
Well, before prioritizing, there really needs to be a willingness to invest in the first place. Store brands way too often get caught up in the trap of we buy everything on net, but we only promote on deal. as a result, what happens is that in spite of some recent gains, store brands still receive significantly less than their fair share of promotion activity. That limits their ability to achieve growth and in turn really drive overall profitability in the long term. In most every category, there's more than enough margin to be able to invest in building your brand and finding ways to drive higher profits over time.
Yeah. So it was pointed out earlier, innovation and customization often create inefficiencies in the manufacturing process. So how can brand owners help in that area?
I was just talking with a retailer a week or so ago, and this topic came up, interestingly enough. And their point of view was that they really had to take, if they were going to move things forward, they really had to share some of the risk and take some of the ownership of what was going on in creating and driving some new innovation. Doing niche items and new concepts, really is a lot more expensive, and it's incredibly more complex for the manufacturer. There are a lot of costs involved. Being upfront and honest about the situation, and then working from their point of view with the manufacturer to find ways to minimize those risks, maybe minimize some of the cost, was a way that together they could get in an answer. There's a recognition that, yes, these items are going to cost more, but the good news is that they command higher retails, and, in turn, you can drive much higher consumer loyalty.
Yeah. Doug, do you have anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, Kevin, I would just add that, if trading partners are looking at moving forward with some innovation that requires a cost expense to both, or that they very early on, they should articulate in the conversation each other's expectations of the business opportunity, develop those milestones and KPIs for performance, and even more importantly, when and what does an exit clause look like? This ensures that both parties have a clear understanding and can enter the partnership focused on building business and not just looking over their shoulder and, being worried about what happens if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Again, another topic we could spend a lot of time on, but in the interest of time, let's keep moving forward. So promoting private brands ties into our last slide, and that need for capital investment to innovate and promote. And so as seen here, retailers said that print advertising is still the most used vehicle to promote. And interestingly, Facebook was a close second. Yet the respondents shared that private brands are behind in leveraging social media. So, Doug, why do you think the respondents feel private brands is behind in social media?
Kevin, I'm going to give you a few dates and try to draw a picture of how fast this digital transformation is happening. February 2004, March 2006, October 2010. Those are the launch dates for Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Today, millennials are using Pinterest to create shopping lists by looking at recipes while they're in the store. Marketing is much more complicated today than it was 8, 10, or 12 years ago. I think for those that are engaged in digital and social, the feeling stems from the unknown. It's the inability or still trying to sort of wrap their arms around to easily measure the effectiveness of social media or digital marketing. For the two legacy and still primary vehicles of marketing, it's much easier to measure the effectiveness of the campaign. Unfortunately, today's consumers are consuming information from a number of different mediums. The resource requirements and the speed of delivery and response that are put on the brand owners are very different today than they were when we simply had to deal with print.
And Jim, what do you think on this topic?
Kevin, I'm going to go back to an earlier question, and for me, what I see as the biggest risk for store brands today is how effectively we embrace social and digital media. For a national brand, there's an ongoing consumer recognition of who you are, and it makes it very easy for a consumer to link with them through digital channels. For a store brand manufacturer, it's the retailer that owns the brands. And so the identification is there, and the burden of proof is really on the retailer. Not all of them are up to speed yet. Some are making some great progress. But we also see organizationally sometimes there's a disconnect between where the social and digital marketing occurs, and that may be siloed apart from where category management and store brand decisions are being made. And there's an opportunity to bring those together. Where we see this come to fruition in the market, and one example that I'd like to cite is if we look at the number of retailers that have load-to-card coupons and how few of them include their own brands in those programs.
Okay. In a more general sense, and with this slide here, with all of these multiple ways to reach the consumer, Jim, what are, in your estimation, are the top 3 or 4 that relate best to private brands?
Well, here's a few of them, and maybe the list is longer, but the first thing that I would do is really to get on board with what the whole omni-channel trend is. And even though omni means many, what this is really about is finding one way that you need to think about communicating to consumers across all of the channels that you do business in. There's a handful today that are approaching some consistent messaging. But not everybody's doing it yet. The second thing I'd look at is that, the need here is really not just in the store, it's also on the screen. The beauty of electronic media is that digital ads can be made interactive with all kinds of information about the product, videos on how it's made, recipes, anything you want to put in there that's really no more than a click away. And I think we're going to see that starting to move forward today, pretty soon. The technology is here. It's not hard. We just need to do it. I know in a few minutes, Heidi's really going to give you a few more ideas about how this can be applied, but I think this is a real attractive area. And then finally, it's time to recognize that social and digital media is the least costly and probably most efficient media that we have. But it gets utilized less for store brands than for other products. It's not hard. It's not that expensive, certainly compared to print ads. And millennials aren't reading the papers, so, the faster we evolve, probably the better.
Okay. Let's continue on. We spoke about customization earlier in this webcast, and here you see 91% of manufacturers responded that they bring innovation to their customers. And also, as noted on this slide, the customer brings innovation to them only about 18% of the time. So, Jim, can suppliers and brand owners develop, customized, innovative products that develop loyalty and differentiation, as we've been discussing, that these industry leaders are looking for if the suppliers are the primary drivers?
Well, certainly they can, and we see a lot of them in the marketplace. A lot of the innovation is probably going to have to come primarily from the manufacturers because they can really be focused on their individual categories. It's hard for a buyer that is responsible for dozens of categories to really be in tune completely with, what's going to be next. So for me, it's really fine if the suppliers take a lead role. Conversely, we hear from a lot of manufacturers, though, who have tried to move the needle forward, but they've had a hard time getting traction with a lot of their customers to adopt some of these new ideas. To paraphrase Wayne Gretzky, it's really important we start looking not where the puck is, but really where it's going to be. And that requires both sides to get there. A good example we see going on now is organics. Store brands are really leading all the growth there. So if we can emulate that, I think we'll be in good shape.
Let me phrase the question a little differently. Should there be a more balanced approach to customization and innovation?
I think it's maybe a matter of more appropriate to say collaborative, perhaps, than balanced. Who starts the idea is certainly less important than whether or not we get it to the market.
Right, right. Doug, do you have, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Kevin, I don't see an issue with suppliers filling the pipeline. As we've mentioned, Jim mentioned, they live and breathe their categories. Is it easier if the brand owner drives it? Probably, yeah, because then they're invested in the success of the new product. And it's not to say they're not otherwise, but they have a little bit more skin in the game if they bring the idea. I think the important message is wherever the intel and ideas come from, it's that trading partners should hold each other accountable to identifying ways for new incremental growth. Let's challenge each other to continue to look outside there and find those opportunities.
Okay. Okay, now let's take a brief pause from these survey results to hear another perspective. And to do that, it's my pleasure to introduce Heidi Detloff. Heidi is Vice President of Marketing at Digimarc Corporation. She's a 25-year technology marketing veteran, having joined Digimarc after a career in a number of leadership roles at IBM, Sequent Computers, and Edelman Worldwide. In her role at Digimarc, Heidi leads product and partner marketing, creative services, digital and social marketing, and corporate communications. Heidi, I hand over the program to you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks for letting me join today's webinar. It's been a great discussion so far with Doug and Jim. And speaking of innovation, you're probably wondering, who is Digimarc? So just a quick introduction of Digimarc. We are the inventor of the Digimarc barcode. And basically, we do everything that the traditional UPC barcode does, but you don't have to see it. Digimarc basically adds a digital code or a global trade item number to the artwork files. And basically what this does is it transforms your static product packaging or other materials into smart, connected media. In addition to our Digimarc barcode, we also are the inventor of the Digimarc Discover software. So allowing you to identify or discover the actual Digimarc barcode. And so we actually have a Digimarc Discover app that's available on iTunes and the different mobile app shops so that you can download it. But we also allow retailers and brands to also integrate our mobile software development kit within their application environment as well. And then we also work with all of the leading point-of-scale manufacturing companies like Datalogic, NCR, Honeywell, and Zebra, so that you can also identify and discover the Digimarc barcode at point of sale. And then we're continuing to work with a number of other leading machine vision companies, so again, the Digimarc barcode can be discovered. So that's who Digimarc is. But what I would love to share with you is new dimensions in packaging. Now, I'm a long-time marketing professional, and I've been trained on the 5 to 6 Ps. I think we add a P, I think, every year in marketing. But I'll focus on 3 right now. So the product, promotion, and partners, again, with the intent, and I think both Doug and Jim echoed this, with the intent of improving customer service and, of course, loyalty. So let's start with the product. So for product, consider how your product can actually become a new digital channel for your brand, helping you connect customers as well as your supply chain providers. And as you concept, design, and develop your private label products, you can explore how your product can actually come to life digitally. It's a pretty powerful opportunity for you, which then ties into the next P of promotion. Imagine the possibilities of how you can leverage a connected product or package in your retail promotions. It's turning your product packaging into a new digital narrator for your brand. This could include recipes, how-to instructions, brand romance, perhaps education and gamification, loyalty and coupons, and of course product transparency, which came up earlier. Where does the product come from? What ingredients does it include? GMO disclosures, nutrition facts, you name it. But it doesn't have to just stay with just the package or the product. You can also apply the Digimarc barcode across your store shelf labels, perhaps on your point of purchase merchandising displays. The possibilities are unlimited. In fact, I would love to see on the next survey that instead of print being the number one item, it's actually the package, which of course involves print, but it actually turns the package again into that digital narrator for your brand. And then I think that it also has an opportunity for you to use the connected package to create new connections with all your suppliers and your partners, adding new value across the supply chain, allowing you to perhaps track and trace the product from the back office all the way to the front office. In fact, we have a little diagram here, which we call the connected package journey. Just like your shoppers and your customers have a buying journey, well, imagine the connected package also having a journey of itself because it's now brought to life digitally. From back into the manufacturing process, through warehouse, the retail distribution center, and of course cross-dock solutions for some of you, all the way out to the retail store environment, directly into the hands of the consumer at point of sale, and then ultimately landing at home. And through some of Digimarc's partners, we too actually can carry that journey even further, working closely with brands and retailers, perhaps in a recycling opportunity and sustainability as well. The intent here is really to use your product and package itself to drive new digital innovation. Use it as a new promotion channel. Create new value across the supply chain. At the end of the day, a more efficient value chain will provide optimized customer and shopper experience and ultimately drive greater loyalty. So Kevin, back to you.
Oh, Heidi, thank you. Thanks for that additional perspective on the possibilities of technology going forward. So thank you. I do want to remind the live audience that if you have questions, now is your time to enter them into the system, and we can queue them up and address them in just a few short minutes here. We're going to now jump back into the survey, and we asked about whether organizations have goals for private brands. And so what you see here is that while 69% of respondents said they had quantifiable private brand goals across the organization, 31%, almost a third, said they did not. So how important is it to have specific private brand goals, and who should develop these metrics, and who should be accountable for achieving these goals? Jim, I'll kick that to you first.
Well, it's a great question, Kevin. This is really at the crux of the category management project that we're working on with FMI. I think this all really starts with just understanding the importance of store brands and the economics in the first place. You ask people a simple question. Customer goes to the store and say for an NBE item, they have a choice between a $4 store brand and a $5 national brand. The question isn't just on the margin in the sale, but really what happens to the dollar? Does that get respent in the store? How much more sales and how much more margin does that generate by giving, if you will, empowering the customer to spend more? There's also the flip side of that equation, and that's if the private brand item costs the retailer, say, $1.20 less, that's additional cash flow that you can use to go back to our investment question, either to drive your store brand program, build new stores, whatever you want to do. On the metrics side, what's really important here is that we stop just looking at the score of the ball game at the end, how much sales and how much margin do we get, but really begin to start to measure what is it that drives those numbers. It's a concept that is referred to as activity share, and it really begins with a simple premise. Doesn't it make sense if we want to get a 20 or 25% share of store brands? Shouldn't the frequency of our merchandising, the space in the ads, the share of our digital space be directed against our own private brands? This really doesn't happen very often, though, so that's a needle that needs to move. The reality is there's a lot of mathematical relationships here that once you understand them, they very clearly really define the thresholds that you have to get to in order to grow store brands beyond the share you have today. It's not enough just to say you're going to work harder, faster, smarter, or better. That won't get you there unless you know what numbers you need to achieve to drive you.
Okay. In the interest of time, we're gonna move on. For the last, we're reaching the home stretch here on our survey results. So I'm going to give the live audience a couple of seconds here to look at this slide because there's a lot going on. The survey asked respondents to rank a topic's importance, seen here in the green bars, versus their perception of their performance, seen here in the orange. So what you see here across the board are gaps between aspirations and where the respondents felt they ranked in terms of performance. So Jim, how can we begin to close these gaps?
Well, it really goes back to the benchmarking that we talked about before. The most important thing is first defining how do we know when our performance is actually aligned with our goals. Then ask what gets us there and start to do it and track it as we go forward.
Yeah. And Doug, how about that same question for you?
Kevin, I totally agree with Jim. You cannot know where you're going, where you should go if you don't know where you're coming from. Speaking in generalities, traditionally trading partners are focused on three primary discussion metrics, and that's quality, cost, and service. If those were met successfully, all is good, and I'll call you when something has or may impact one of those. What will move everyone beyond those more tactical conversations, albeit important, are discussions looking outside of our immediate worlds. You know, as an example, how about have a meeting with your trading partner in the store or in an alternate channel and walk the store with them in as an agenda item. If we don't hold each other accountable to having these more strategic discussions, as Jim mentioned, we'll remain very tactical and reactionary.
Okay. So the survey also asked about a number of store brand issues and asked both the retail brand owners and the manufacturers to rank them. Here you see the ranks in green represent the retailers, the orange, the rank by supplier. Food and product safety and quality are ranked high and relatively equal by both manufacturers and brand owners. But we see gaps in other areas, in branding and social media, where brand owners rank them higher in importance. And also in traceability and sustainability, where manufacturers rank those higher in importance compared to brand owners. So Doug, I'll ask you first. Why the divergence, and can we close these gaps?
Well, Kevin, if you look at the primary role of each party, I'm not surprised by the gap. Can it be closed potentially with continued dialogue and collaboration? But manufacturers carry the burden to deliver on safety and quality to the retailer. With FSMA rules rolling out, the table stakes are being raised. Conversely, the retailers carry the burden to market and build the consumer loyalty to move the products off the shelf. As mentioned earlier by Jim, the gap can be closed. Breaking down the silos, having more collaborative conversations with the consumer at the center. Here at FMI, we like to call it consumer-centric collaboration.
Okay. Again, on the interest of time, let's move forward. So performance by company type. Here's a similar graph. Ranks performance by both manufacturers and brand owners. And when we look at these metrics by performance, quality and food safety, which were equal in importance, as shown on the last slide, show a gap here between manufacturers and brand owners in terms of how well they are addressing these areas. So brand owners' perception is much higher than the manufacturers, yet manufacturers would seem to be more responsible and more accountable for delivering on quality, food safety, and even traceability, Doug, to your point, where we see manufacturers indicating a higher performance than brand owners. So, so beginning with Jim, so why is there the gap on perception between brand owners and manufacturers in these areas?
Well, for me, it was actually refreshing to see that the gaps were quite a bit less than I might have anticipated, and that really retailers and manufacturers were reasonably aligned on most measures. So, if we're all starting from the same place, it should make the journey maybe a little bit easier.
Okay. Doug, your thoughts?
Yeah, and just going back to collaboration, if your trading partners are integral, easy for me to say, to the success of your business, take the time to ensure and take the time that they ensure they understand your priorities and objectives. And even more importantly, what is their role, in helping you achieve your goals and priorities?
Okay, as I said, we're reaching sort of the home stretch here, and so let me review some of the key learnings here. You see some on your screen, and I'll offer some additional ones. So store brands have grown in importance as retail competitive tools. Performance will need to have the same trajectory and to remain a key strategic asset. The industry views private brands' main role as a loyalty builder, which optimizes other benefits such as margin builder and leveraging national brands. Product customization is the biggest opportunity for private brand growth, and this includes focusing in on unique products and even new flavor profiles. The industry views the biggest threats to private brands as lack of capital investment or risk of failure, slowing innovation. Private brand owners have an opportunity to use newer digital platforms to reach a broader and more diverse audience. And stakeholders have an opportunity to align importance and performance metrics by including trader partners in their overall strategy and mission of the private brand program. And so it's time for Q&A. I see some questions queued up here now, a couple. If there are others, now is the time to enter them into the system, and we can ask them of our participants here. So I'll queue up the first question, and this questioner names a couple of retailers, but I'll make it a more general question. And so, when a retail cites private brands as key to their growth strategy, but then the space given to private brands in their marketing efforts, whether through circulars or websites or however they're engaging the customer, doesn't reflect that, lags the national brands. Where's the disconnect there? Where do you think the disconnect is? Is it, as this questioner asks, are these retailers kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth?
Jim, why don't you start?
Yeah, this is really part of what we're getting after with the category management process. And the reality is a lot of retailers really don't think about what those relationships are and how they impact what their penetration is. So you get back to we're going to work harder, but we're not quite sure how, and we haven't quite measured it. I think as we get those approaches changed within the industry in total, we're going to be able to see everybody move forward and know how to move forward better, because the triggers in each category are a little different too.
Doug, do you want to?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that take a look. Our industry lives on an average margin of 1.9%. Right, and so it's retailers have had to be very creative as to how, and that's 1.9% with some really nice private brand margins. So they're really having to be creative as to how they can control costs and drive profit. And you got to have that partnership with the national brands, and they bring a lot of dollars to the party. So for some retailers, making that move to what I would truly call category management, and is putting the category and consumer first, sometimes there's competing interests.
Okay. We have another question here. I'm going to not quite sure what it's driving at. What do you attribute the private label success of personal care brand, personal care private brand versus a food personal care brand that may be struggling? So I think the question is, what's a key to success of personal care store brands that seem to be in some ways lagging the national brand? Any insight
Kevin,
there?
Yeah, I'll take that one first, Jim. And it's specifically discussing Ulta, which is a store that provides beauty care, versus a traditional conventional grocery store that provides beauty care. And I think there's probably two things: destination and experience is what is the biggest difference. As it's retailers are starting to really sort of wrap their arms around with how do they create an experience for consumers while they're in their stores. You can see it in retailers like Wegmans. You can see what's going on with Lowe's down in California now. North Carolina with their new stores they're formatting. They're really starting to try to create that experience. Ulta creates a really strong experience, and they almost, through their store and their experience in the store, create an era of authority. Right, so it's a little bit more of a challenge for some retailers to do that throughout the entire store, and that is my opinion only, is one of the reasons why some consumers would prefer to go to an Ulta versus a grocery store.
Jim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, if you look at Ulta as a retailer, and then if you put them in kind of the same corral with somebody like a Costco or a Wegmans with food, you have much of the same thing going on in terms of how the store identity is just completely interwoven with the brand identity of their products. Giant Eagle Market District is another one that comes to mind, or H-E-B Central Market. It's a little easier to do it at what I might call the somewhat higher end of the product spectrum. But, this is, again, getting consistent messaging all the way through. It's hard to get people to get excited about your brand if they're not excited about your store first. So there's different kinds of challenges at play there.
Okay. So this next question asks, will bigger retailers still take the cake on private label? Large chains like Kroger, or can a smaller retail still create differentiated private label, private brands to compete with national brands?
Why don't you start, Jim?
I'll start on that one, Doug. In the context of doing the category management study, we have a number of FMI members who are involved in this project, both big and small. And I have to tell you, it's exciting to go visit them and walk in their stores and look at, among some of the smaller, more regional ones, how they're attacking this problem. You can get at it certainly on the perishable side, maybe a little faster and easier, but you can also get after it on the experience side. And, everything from spice shops at Lowe's, or some of the ways I'm thinking that Big Y has done their candy departments and other pieces like that, where regionals can, in many cases, work with someone who is local, who can leverage the local angle as part of that as well, and really put something out there that's very exciting and very unique to that retailer. I think, in some categories it's going to be more difficult because you may not have the volume to create the run sizes, but now we're seeing specialty food manufacturers and others step to the table to help in those areas. So the opportunity's there. It's a little harder, but yeah, it can be done for sure.
Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
I would absolutely agree with that, with what Jim said. There's a lot of innovation going out there. There's a lot of smaller manufacturers, local manufacturers. Yes, run times do become an issue, and, it's probably a little bit more of the mainstream type. There's service providers out there today. I'll give an example, RangeMe.com. That's their whole world, is identifying new manufacturing streams, new companies that are bringing out new types of products to continue keeping that innovation pipeline full. So does it take a little bit more work potentially? I know RangeMe's trying to make it really easy for people to do that. But it's just taking the time to actually go out and understand what it is your consumer wants and how you can provide it to them, and then find that manufacturer that you can create a long-term partnership with. Get into the game with them for a while and give them a reason to actually want to invest.
Okay. And so I see we've reached the top of the hour, and so with that, I'll say that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you to our live audience for joining us today. A reminder that we'll be producing one more live webcast in this series next month. You see that on your screen, Wednesday, June 21st. Please stick around for a couple of minutes to tell us about your experience today. And again, your feedback will help us in making our future webcasts even more informative and worthwhile. Thanks again to Jim Wisner and Doug Baker for their insight and participation today. You guys did a great job. Thanks to Heidi Detloff and Digimarc for their insight and participation and their support of this webcast. Heidi, thanks so much for helping us out. I appreciate it. And thank you again for joining us. Hope to have you back in June for the final installment in this webcast series. My best to you until then. Have a great day.